So the way that our brains like to remember is if information is so dangerous, salient, so relevant, and repeated, right?
Mm.
So there are the three ways that our brains like to remember and retain information. And I think you can rule out pretty quickly when you're talking about maths GCSEs or English GCSEs, whatever exam you're doing, similar if you're doing university stuff or college, right? None of it's dangerous to you. All right, so you can put that one off straight
Yeah,
away. You know,
yeah.
it ain't gonna come up and kick you in the throat. That's not gonna. So
Sometimes it feels like it, but it is not
sometimes
actually
it
going
feels
to.
like
It's
it,
not
but it's not
going
going
to.
to.
Yeah.
So first off, our brains are like, well, we're not going to learn that way because this stuff isn't dangerous to you. So then it becomes, is it salient, relevant, and is it repeated? When we say salient, that also can mean interesting. Are we interested in it? You basically, right, if it's interesting to you, you're going to be more likely to remember it. That's just simple. You,
Yep.
you enjoy doing it, you enjoy the repeating process. So you're going to remember that much more effectively, essentially, right? So, and then if it's boring and you hate it and you'd rather do anything else, that's when it's really difficult to remember because then you are relying solely on repeating and that repetition. And how are you going to do that in an effective way?
Hello, and welcome back to One Brain at a Time. I'm your host, Adam, and I'm joined today by my colleague and fantastic primary program co-lead, Mr. Andy Feist. Hello, Andy. How are you?
I'm good, mate. I'm good. Yeah, fine, man. A little bit flat. Monday morning, Spurs are rubbish. We'll move on very swiftly.
Yeah, we'll
No, man,
skip over that one.
skip over that. But we're entering March, which is we're getting there. We got a week
Almost there.
left,
This is the
less
last
than a
pod
week
of
left.
February.
It
That's
is,
a
mate.
big
So,
deal.
yeah. So, no, man, it's all good. I had a few days off last week, which was very nice. Mrs. obviously had half term with her work, so that was nice. Yeah, man, just chilling and
Lovely
doing a
stuff.
few nice bits and bobs, man. What about you? What's been going on?
Good, thanks. Yeah, I wear the same jumper for every podcast recording just because of the nature of how
Every single one.
everything comes out. Not everyone, but if you are a regular watcher, this blue jumper is probably the podcast MVP. So
I
I
like it,
will
man.
change that at some point soon when the weather gets warmer. I will not always wear this jumper, but it's very
Leave him
warm.
alone. He's just moved out. He has to wear the same clothes every
Exactly.
single day.
I'm poor. I don't have enough money to buy another jumper.
It's difficult, man.
This
It's
is the
difficult.
one jumper you got. But
Well, I
yes, no,
think
it's
I can resonate with you a little bit,
speaking
man,
of
because
jumpers, yeah. If you are listening to the podcast, it's worth coming to the YouTube to check out the polar bear.
got my polar bear jumper on, man. And the reason
Why?
for that is it was the closest thing in arm's distance to where I was getting ready. So it's
Correct.
I'll grab that. But I tried to say to Adam before, like, I'll make some spiel about how it's symbolic of leaving winter, but actually it's just because I couldn't be bothered to find anything else. So
Yeah,
here we
that's about
go.
right.
Here we are. Welcome to Monday.
I think that's a symptom of I don't know if it's a male thing, but men's putting clothes on, whatever's on top of the pile, that's what I wear. I have three outfits, whichever one's the closest to me, that's what I'm wearing today.
Are you telling me
So
I'm meant to sift through that and get to the bottom, mate? I ain't doing that.
apparently people
That's,
choose outfits in advance.
that's just, I
That's
can't
crazy.
even
I mean,
begin to fathom that, mate.
imagine having the time. Sod
So
that.
mental. Yeah, not doing it, mate. Not doing it.
Speaking of half term last week, we wanted to dive in today to talk about something which we are remarkably, I don't think we've talked about yet, which is about actually just learning. And, obviously, so for the students listening, for anyone at university, but for adults too, we've got GCSEs coming up, we've got SATs coming up, we've got, GCSEs, university exams coming up. All of this stuff is kind of on
Yes.
the horizon now. We're out of half term, February half term. This is when schools are probably trying to start to talk about GCSEs and revision practices and stuff like that. So we thought we would do today, we'd discuss what learning actually is and how it works in the brain. Because obviously we are a neuroscience podcast, that's our job. But out of this, hopefully, you get the idea that learning does not have to be 7 hours of solid reading of the textbook. It's actually
For
much
sure.
more beneficial for your brain, for your ability to learn things. If you do little and often learning, you revise for short bursts of time. Yeah. Well, let's just dive into the actual explanation of what learning is, because then it will make sense. But very, very basically, your brain remembers three types of information. Andy, what are the three types?
So the way that our brains like to remember is if information is so dangerous, salient, so relevant, and repeated, right?
Mm.
So there are three ways that our brains like to remember and retain information. And I think, mate, I do this every single day of my life pretty much. And when I'm explaining it, right, you can rule out pretty quickly when you're talking about maths GCSEs or English GCSEs, whatever exam you're doing, similar if you're doing university stuff or college, right? None of it's dangerous to you. All right, so you can put that one off straight
Yeah,
away. You know,
yeah.
it ain't gonna come up and kick you in the throat. That's not gonna. So
Sometimes it feels like it, but it is not
sometimes
actually
it
going
feels
to.
like
It's
it,
not
but it's not
going
gonna
to.
do it.
Yeah.
So first off, our brains are like, well, we're not gonna learn that way because this stuff isn't dangerous to you. So then it becomes, is it salient, relevant, and is it repeated? When we say salient, that also can mean interesting. Are we interested in it? You basically, right, if it's interesting to you, you're going to be more likely to remember it. That's just simple. You,
Yeah.
you enjoy doing it, you enjoy the repeating process. So you're going to remember that much more effectively, essentially, right? So, and then if it's boring and you hate it and you'd rather do anything else, that's when it's really difficult to remember because then you are relying solely on repeating and that repetition. And how are you going to do that in an effective way? Because there are effective and non effective ways of repeating content, repeating information to go from short to long term memory. So that's, I guess, what we'll dive into. But
Exactly right.
that's my overview.
Thank you for the overview, Andy. Very, very lovely. Very, very good. Yes, I think that you can tell we're not teachers because we can say this, and also my favorite part of the job is saying this that
Mm.
lots of subjects at school are not salient, which means that they are
Yeah,
probably not very interesting, and that is fine because let's be real, lots of things in life that you need to know or need to do are not very interesting. Like washing. That's not very interesting, but I need to do it, and I need to learn how to do
mm,
it properly. And there's a lot of things that so understanding that if things are not interesting to your brain, not dangerous to your brain, the only other option for learning is we're just going to have to keep repeating it to our brain.
for sure.
Okay, and that is such a fundamental piece of information to understand about going into our GCSEs, to going into any subjects we're trying to learn. Just if we're just trying to kind of be someone who retains more information in their lives, you are
Yeah.
not going to remember things if they are not repeated to you, if you are not interested in them. That's why, like, if I asked Andy about a Spurs player from 10 years ago, he'd probably be able to name them, the whole squad and do loads of information about it. I couldn't, not for
Sadly,
Spurs
yes.
anyway. Um, but that's because Andy's interested in Spurs. But if you ask my mum anything about football, like, even a really simple question is like, kind of who won the league last year, she would have no idea because she's
Yeah,
uninterested
yeah,
in it, and that information,
yeah.
despite my best efforts, is not repeated enough to her. So we need to, if we going in with that understanding that the things that we don't like, we're going to have to repeat to ourselves more, gives us a good kind of basis for how we need to build our kind of, let's say like a revision timetable kind of thing, right? So if you really like maths, first of all, what's wrong with you? Second of all, you probably don't need to revise maths as much as you need to revise the subjects that you are not interested in, that you don't retain information from as easily. And this is why it ends up with us having to study the subjects that we dislike the most, maybe we struggle with the most. And I think there's a key part of learning which we need to talk about here is that basically we talk about learning in a very, very broad sense all the time. What your brain is doing constantly at a certain level is learning, okay? Because all learning is practicing a piece of information to the point where you can retain it and use it in an exam question in your life or whatever. And this is the idea that we talk about all the time. So if you're playing one brain at a time bingo this week, here's your neuroplasticity tick, ding. What our brains do a lot, we get better at doing it. Okay, and this obviously applies to learning as well. So everything we practice, we are learning and we are developing our skill in that thing.
But that's the thing. But we'll get into this and we'll dive into this more. But when you're talking about things that you're not so interested in, right? And this is if you're going to lay out really, really clearly the problem with GCSEs is you could choose. You've probably got what on average kids take four options. Is it three options, four options,
Something
which
like that,
one
yeah.
is their core subjects, right? Um, you're not going to have the same degree of interest in all of those options. Likewise for your cause, you have to take your cause. You've had no decision process in that. You have to take it. So you are going to have varying levels of interest. The problem is, say you enjoy two subjects, right? You've still got seven, you've got eight that you don't enjoy. Okay, well, you still need to work grit, determination, graft, bit of hustle to get to the grades that you want to get to move on into college and beyond, whatever it is you want to go and do. So just that is a hurdle, and it's a massive one. You are going to basically accept yourself that, like, oh, a lot of these subjects I'm not going to enjoy. I find boring, and they're not salient because, well, I'm doing geography, but I don't want to be a geologist. I don't want to look at rocks for the next 45 years. But all
I
right,
think
well, you
any
still
geographer listening would be annoyed at that description of what geographers do.
it couldn't have been more accurate. So I think, just accepting and acknowledging that you're going to struggle with some of these subjects, but learning those little hacks. And what we're essentially trying to get people to do is develop these things called executive function skills, which are basically housed in your prefrontal cortex. Okay. And these executive function skills are attention, focus, determination, perseverance, all of the synonyms of those things, right? And just get into a place where you are doing the things you don't want to do for the betterment of your future self. We are so big on that action your potential, man. It is doing the things today that's going to help you tomorrow. And learning is no different. Your well-being practices, your mindfulness skills and techniques, all these things we're talking about, you are doing them for the betterment and the development of yourself. So learning is no different. I hated so many subjects at school. I don't know if that surprises anyone. Hopefully it does, because he's just such a well-rounded adult.
You
But
seem like such an academic, Andy.
such an academic, such an academic. But like, I was never, I never thought I'd be smart enough to go to uni, let alone go and get masters, which I ended up doing.
You
But
showed
there
them.
are so many subjects. Yeah, man, exactly. So there's so many subjects I just absolutely despised. But a penny drops for me probably about 4 or 5 months before my exams. I was like, oh man, it's actually probably beneficial for me to start working and stop messing around, because I'm going to, more for me, 3, 4, 5 years time where I can't get a job, can't get anywhere because I thought it was funny to mess around when I was 15, 16. And sometimes that happens for people earlier than it did for me. Sometimes it happens for people later. But just understanding your cognitive processes and that. All right, I don't like history. This is not me. I love history. I don't like history, but I need to get my history GCSE. All right, well, what are the ways you're going to go about and do that? How am I going to develop these executive function skills? Well, like Adam said, we're never going to ask you to sit down and do 7 hours of looking page to page for a textbook. That is not the most effective way to strengthen your neural connections. It's not. Short bursts of effective focus of attention is the way to go about your revision.
Another thing to talk about with learning is, okay, so there's an often a used metaphor for the brain, which it works in some ways, but it's just not accurate, right? So people talk about the brain being like a muscle, right? Which it isn't. The brain is not a muscle. It's because it doesn't act in the same way as a muscle does. But what is similar about how the brain works and how muscles work is that you do not build learning and memory in the moment. You build it in the gap between the learning period, like periods or revision sessions or whatever it is, right? So
Let me
when you
just
go
sit
to the
on that for
gym,
a second. I'm sorry to just interrupt your
yeah,
train
no,
of thought and your flow, but people. No one knows that. I didn't know that until about 6 months ago. That well, I should say longer than that. I've been working longer than that. Yeah, so that's just the fact that process occurs after the fact, not
Mm.
during the fact. Is please explain, my man, because that is just bamboozling.
Let's do it. Okay, so we've got our neurons, and basically those neurons take time. So let's think of it in the very muscle capacity for a second, right? So when you go to the gym, if you let's say you're doing arm day, right, you kind of rip your muscles apart, and then they heal stronger, so that next time they like you go back in and you're stronger, right? That is very very basically how building muscle works, how building stuff for fitness and stuff like that in the gym goes. Your brain does not kind of rip itself a new one and then have to repair itself in that physical way, right? But what happens when you fire those neurons, your brain realizes it needs to grow neurons in that area and starts to develop and connect more neurons in that area. So we've done a 30-minute revision session on history. 2 days later, we go back to that same topic, we did that same subject. We have, in that period of time, our brain has developed and grown neurons more in that area, more in that are more connected in that area, which means we have a greater memory of it. But we need to now practice it again. And when we are actively recalling that information, neurons do not grow that quickly. They grow fast, how like plants grow and stuff, but not like immediately in the moment. But as you're building the memory through the gaps between it. And I think we should bring sleep in here, and we will do an episode on sleep in a few weeks because we touched on it
Yeah,
last week and we're
man.
talking about it now. But when you go to sleep, one of the most amazing things about what happens when you
Let me get
sleep
my
is
spectacles on for this because this is some fancy
got to
stuff,
get the
man.
glasses on for sleep, man. Um,
I've made
but
note, Adam. This is an action your potential, one brain at a time. First, I have made notes for the podcast.
whoa! Not only have you made
This
notes
is
of podcasts, can I just say your head accessories are off the giant chart today? Because you've got headphones, a hat,
a
and
bit
glasses
over.
on.
It's a bit
This is
overstimulating
ridiculous.
for those involved in it. Please continue, and if you dare say what I'm about to say, I will be fuming. Go.
Okay. But okay, I'll keep it brief so I definitely don't step on what you're going to say. But when you go to sleep, basically, there's a lot of things that happen when you go to sleep. One of the things that happens is your brain refires the neurons that were fired in that day and strengthens them as a result of that. So one of the reasons why, when you don't understand something the day before, if you practice it and you kind of go to bed thinking about it and then wake up the next day and you maybe have more of a grasp on it, often you hear this in songwriters, people who are writing music. Kind of, when we say sleep on something, the reason that sleeping on
Yeah.
something works is because your brain has strengthened the connections and connected neurons together as you were asleep that they were not connected the day before. So you can literally think in different ways the next day. Pretty mad. So, but this is why sleep is such a fundamental part of a good, healthy learning, revision, kind of plan is because when you sleep, you are building memory. Memory is built when you sleep. You are building your ability to recall those things. And obviously, you have to put the effort in. You have to put the reps in like in the mental gym, even though your brain's not a muscle on the day of that you go to sleep. But then as you sleep, your brain will refire those neurons, connect them together, and grow neurons and in those connections to make them stronger, which means you are able to recall them in different ways. Did I step on what you were going to say?
Wunderbar. No, not at all. Great.
Sensational.
So, all right, I'm going to do this thing where every time I talk neuroscience, in the neuroscience sense, not in my lovely wishy-washy emotional sense, which we all appreciate. Adam is the neuroscience. I'm the light comic relief, right? Eh? What am I talking about? So, the glasses indicate Andy's going into a science world.
I like this as a kind of like a segment. When Andy puts the glasses on, it's getting serious.
Andy's talking neuroscience. Get ready for this.
Let's go, baby.
Hopefully, he doesn't absolutely butcher it. Right, you ready for this?
It won't.
So, after 25 minutes of cognition, inside our brains, inside our neurons, I should say, we develop glutamate. All right. And glutamate is the gooey, gluey sort of substance that makes it harder to retain information, makes it harder to process certain bits of content, right? So, what we need to do after 25 minutes of cognition, of work, of graft, of hard work, of sort of just learning, you need to do certain things to get rid of and eradicate that glutamate. After you do about 25 minutes of work, getting yourself up and active, doing something for 5, 10 minutes where you're having a walk around the house, you're walking outside, you're going to run up and down the stairs. I had a meeting with our other consultant the other day, Darren, and he just said when he was doing his masters, he would literally do 25 minutes and run up and down the stairs for about 5 minutes.
That's such a Darren thing to
You
do.
can picture that, innit?
It's just, most people go for a walk. He's up and down
Yeah.
the stairs.
Darren's up and
Love
down the
Darren.
stairs, man. So if you live in a bungalow, I'm sorry, that can't.
You can't learn, it's over for you.
Yeah. But so you go and do something physically active, and what happens there is that the glutamate buildup is a really strong way of eradicating that buildup, right? And sleep, as Adam touched on there, sleep is the other way of doing it. Sleep, what happens in the sleep, there are certain sleep cycles, and cerebral spinal fluid gets released and cleans out the brain and helps eradicate that glutamate as well. All right. So those are the
Well,
two ways to really help with sort of that sort of cognitive overload that we'll be experiencing. And when you feel tired and you come home from work, I remember it when I was a kid. Mum and dad coming home from work and being like, my brain hurts, my eyes are hurting. It's because you have just been fully focusing for such a vast amount of time the whole day that you haven't eradicated any glutamate buildup. So you've had such
yeah.
a buildup of plaque that your ability to retain new information and process old information is hindered massively.
Literally,
You're
that you're
done,
exactly
mate.
right. Your brain is gunked up with stuff, so the connections in your brain are not as working as well, which is why you feel tired. Which is why when you don't get enough sleep the next day, you do not feel like your brain works. You're slower. You're kind of not paying attention as much. It's because your brain is gunked up. It's like it's unclean. It
For
needs
real.
to be, it
For
needs
real.
to have its sleep process process and stuff. And I think that's exactly right. You just smashed the neuroscience there. I'm going to take the mantle of being the light comic relief now. And you're now the neuroscience guy. That was amazing. Very, very well done. Round of applause. Glutamate. Didn't expect glutamate in the podcast. I hadn't written that down. So well done.
I hand in my resignation. I'm finished.
He's peaked. He's peaked,
I'm
lads.
done.
He's peaked, lads.
Nah, but that's I like every now and then I drop a nugget, don't I, Adam? Every now and then, mate.
More than every now and again, Andy. Every week, as I'm sure listeners agree. But I think another thing I'm just kind of maybe to kind of end on is this idea of motivation. Lots of people wait for motivation to strike to study, and lots of people wait for kind of inspiration to strike. Oh, I'll do that when I feel like doing that, and where we are right now, we're recording this on Monday, the 23rd of February. We are obviously a long way away from most people's exams. Obviously, I don't know who you are and what exams you have, if you have exams, but they're probably quite a long way away still, a couple months at least. So we're like, that's a problem for future me to deal with, right? If we wait for motivation to strike, we will not ever revise, basically. And we will be stuck in a space where we are struggling and very, very stressed and anxious. And take it back a step, right? What we do with our brains is what they get better at doing. If we put off doing work, we procrastinate it, we come up with excuses and reasons why we can't do it, we are practicing our ability to not just get on with the work we know we need to do, okay? For someone listening to this, if you're a GCSE student, if you start revising now and literally do 20 minutes a night after school, you get home from school and you do that 20 minutes revision, you are going to be so much further ahead than most other people in your school, most other people in your class, most other people across the country. But also another crucial thing is you're going to feel so much more confident in the content because you have much more time to get through all of that content, okay? Because you are also not only you are practicing learning, you are practicing the process of learning the things you need to learn, you are practicing the process of self-discipline. Andy mentioned the prefrontal cortex, this bit up here, executive function control. You are never going to want to revise. I have done, Andy, you've done a master's degree, I'm doing a master's degree, I've done an undergraduate degree, we've done A-level, we've done GCSE. I have never once in my entire life wanted to revise any of it. Even subjects that you enjoy in school, you don't want to revise them, you just think you know them, right? No one has ever wanted to revise things. Anyone who tells you that I'm buzzing for this study session, something's wrong with them, okay? And we can say this as experts. Something's wrong with them. You never want to revise, right? But some people, you just got to get on with it. You just got to do it, because the sooner you do it, the sooner you've done it, right? And you're developing and understanding that skill. And as you're developing a routine and a habit, which means it's going to be easier and easier to do it, even on days where you really don't feel like it, if you've built that strong study habit. But also, and this is something that we're both really big on, is if you come home from school, you do your half an hour, you do your hour of revision, the rest of your evening, that's all yours. You can go and watch Spurs get battered by Arsenal if that's what you're up to. Sorry, Andy. That's the best thing I could think of. But the rest of your evening is guilt-free, okay? Like you can have fun, you can enjoy yourself, you can do what you want to do, all right? And that is such an important thing, because if we don't do that, there's always this nagging voice back of our head going, oh, we haven't done your revision yet, you need to do your revision yet. And that compounds and that builds up. And what we do with our brains, we practice. So if we do not revise, we do not do the difficult thing, we do not practice those skills of study reps and practicing these things, we are going to develop a level of, we're going to strengthen our ability to procrastinate it, and that is not going to just stop one day when you decide, because when motivation strikes, because motivation will not strike at any point. Sorry, that's a very long rant.
No,
with a slight stray towards you in the middle there. Sorry about that.
No, that's fine. I'm happy to take that on the chin, mate. So I think it's what you're saying, and just for me to finish off, it's just about that habit loop, which is, and we'll go in. We might even do a whole session on habit forming and habit loops, because it's really interesting, and I'm definitely going to get this wrong. But the fundamental, there's more than two parts to it. I'm going to say that as a disclaimer, but I'm going to talk about just two parts. All right. Just for the moment, because that's all I understand.
You haven't got your glasses on, Andy. Just saying, you're doing neuroscience.
So in habit loop forming, right, basically you need to see a reward. For whatever it is you want to do, your brain needs to see, and our brains seek reward. Okay, so if you're thinking about doing revision, if you can't automatically see the reward of revising being good grades, good positive future, because they're quite abstract, because they're long-term in the future, then that reward system and that forming of that habit might be come less easily to you
Sure. Yeah.
because
Yeah.
you can't automatically see where the revision is going to take you. If you do 25 minutes, 50 minutes of a revision session one Tuesday in November, you're not going to be like, oh yeah, I'm going to get that reward in August the next year when I
Yeah.
pick my results. That's not how you think, but you will. That reward is there. It's not tangible in the current present, but it will be when you pick up these results. So
Sure.
just having the understanding that, like Adam said, you are not going to have that motivation is not waiting to come and smack you in the face. It is something that you have to force yourself to form those positive habits that
Exactly.
can benefit yourself.
But I think also with the rewards, you're exactly right. So we have dopamine, which is a reward-seeking hormone, which helps us
Sure.
to create habit loops, right? And this is why we get addicted to our phones, and we'll do an episode on that at some point in the future.
Yeah.
But you are right in that the reward for revision is abstract and long-term and probably not very satisfying in the moment. But we
Yeah.
can hack that by understanding that we're looking for a reward. Give yourself a reward for doing, a week's worth of revision. Maybe that's a packet of crisps, maybe a packet of sweets, maybe that's giving yourself an extra half an hour to play on Xbox, Fortnite, whatever it is you're doing in the
Sure.
evening if you've done your revision that night. The reward, I would say, and you'll get to a point where, and again, like that's how you kind of start forming a habit. You give yourself a reward for doing the thing, and then after a while, the reward itself is released by doing the habit because your brain likes to get stuff done. It's a task
Yes.
oriented and action oriented organ. So if you start by forming that habit, okay, I'll do this study rep. I'm going to do it for a week, and then I'm going to give myself an extra reward that I wouldn't give myself otherwise, and then it brings that reward seeking bit a bit closer for your brain than the abstract long term thing, because we all struggle with that. And short term, our ability to, especially later in the day, we were talking earlier about being gummed up, and that's nowhere more is that more prevalent than in our prefrontal cortex, which is our executive function. Right now, you are probably, don't know when you're listening to this episode, but if it's the morning, you've probably got quite a lot of capacity left in your prefrontal cortex because it's the morning, depending on how you slept last night, right? Your executive function is high because we work, we go to school, we do things we don't want to do for the majority of our days. We are using a lot of our executive function capacity in the day during the kind of 9 to 5 period of the day, which means that when we get home, we are far more likely to be bouncing around in our emotional reasoning circuits, which are kind of behind your eyes and your kind of worry system. And that stuff is going to go off much, much easier. And you're going to lack the ability in those moments to form those positive habits because the executive function controls are just used up. They kind of go offline, but towards the evening. Okay, so building those habits, bringing those rewards in for yourself, and forming them means it's easier in the future because you won't have to rely as much on an already exhausted part of your brain in the evenings. That got quite complicated quite quickly, but basically, do it as soon as you get home. Form the habit, bring your reward in, and you'll
Sure.
find it easier to build that habit going forward.
You lot listening are veterans of the pod, man. You deal with it complicated stuff. But yeah, I think it's just about just being kind to yourself in a way that isn't evident. Do it
Yeah,
now, because you know you're never gonna feel ready for these things unless you put yourself through that
for
graph,
sure.
really. So, but yeah, man, pleasure
I
as
think
always.
we should get t-shirts with "Be kind to yourself," but not like that, because that's the kind of the theme of the podcast, isn't it? That's the tagline. Because it's "Be kind to yourself," but
AYP merch.
be kind to yourself, but like do the right thing. Do the thing you
Mm.
need to do, not the thing you want to do. Because everything you want to do is probably sit in bed and scroll on your phone.
I reckon we can
Ah,
move to an AYP merch system as
let's
well. I
do it.
reckon.
If you want a t-shirt, let us know. I want a
Yeah,
t-shirt.
yeah,
Maybe that's what I'll wear instead of my jumper next week.
yeah.
AYP
But
merch.
no, pleasure as always, gang, and we will see you next week.
We'll see you next week. Thank you very much for listening. And again, always, as always, get in contact with the show if you enjoy it. If
Yes.
you have anything you want to add, any criticism you want to give, we want to hear all of it. We want to hear from you. And if you enjoyed it, also please share with your friends and family. We're trying to grow this little show. So yeah. If you enjoyed it, please share it with your friends and family and leave us a review and all that stuff. Like, subscribe. I feel like a proper YouTuber when I say that stuff. But yes, thank you very much for listening, and we will see you all next Monday.
See you later.